Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Esoteric. I got a fun and random episode for you guys this Friday because I've been getting an absolute ton of questions lately about the IGS PGM because I covered it in a series about 2 years ago, and because there is a prospective MiSTer FPGA core eventually coming, people really want to know, is the PGM worth it? Should they buy it? Should they collect for it? And how does the hardware work? So in this video we're going to go over the hardware, how it functions, and then every single game I think you should check out. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe. That notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But I absolutely love the IGS PGM board. It basically is a super powered Neo Geo, and it's got some of the cave's best shmups on it of all time in my opinion. This is really fun hardware, and it's actually really accessible hardware as well, because both the boards and the games do not cost that much money compared to some other arcade collecting. You'll see here as we take a little scroll down into it, it looks very similar to a one-slot Neo Geo system, and that is because, at least in some aspects, it does share some similar hardware. Now on the sound side, you have a completely different setup, but it's still going to use a variant of the Motorola 68000 CPU, so it does have a similar code base to what the Neo Geo would use, but this board's going to operate at a higher resolution, at a higher clock speed, and it does have some improved sound as well. So this is kind of adjacent to the Neo Geo, but you'll see that Motorola chip right there, very similar to what would have been in that platform. And then there's just a couple branded IGS chips as well. It's a very simple motherboard, but it's a very reliable motherboard as well. So if you want to get into arcade collecting, this is a really good place to start because it is pure JAMA and it is a basic system. Slot the card in, turn on your power, plug in your controller, and you're 100% good to go. Generally, these do not break whatsoever outside of leaking batteries, and if you have a battery holder in yours, you should be 100% fine. Now, this isn't the most advanced hardware for its time, but it is inexpensive hardware compared to what was on the arcade markets, and in places like Taiwan, cost did matter. And I just love collecting games for this system. Taking a look at Katsui here, even though this is a conversion because Cave did use their own single PCB for their games, it's just so much fun to have these big soft boxes with cartridges in them and having that full artwork as well. It looks great on a shelf. And even the most expensive cartridge games are still not going to be anywhere near what a Neo Geo game might be or some other arcade PCBs. It is a really good place to start collecting because the library isn't huge, but there's a ton of fun to be had on it, and in part 2 of this video in about 2 minutes I'm going to tell you what I think you should play. But the interesting thing is the carts do have some additional processors on them that can be used, but it's so easy as a beginner. The cartridges are keyed, you can only put them in one direction, so if you have a super gun and you plug this in, you're away and playing. It is so easy compared to starting at something like JVS or more bespoke stuff like Model 2 or Model 3 or Namco System 22 or 23. This is a great gateway drug to arcade collecting, and like I said, this is something you can display on your shelf, where an arcade PCB, not something you're going to leave out in the open just to take a look at, because honestly it really isn't that interesting unless you love the hardware itself. And it always gets claimed that the IGS PGM is just a clone of the Neo Geo, and basically it kind of is, but isn't really at all. So many pieces of hardware use similar processors back in the day that so many things could be considered a clone of everything else. It's taking the business model though, cheap cartridges that you can interchange in a cabinet, and making it work for them. And as you'll see here, AES versus PGM, very similar setup as well, and the MVS carts are even bigger. But I absolutely love the IGS PGM hardware. I think it is a great place to start your arcade collecting, or if you do want, these games all emulate perfectly fine on Final Burn Neo. But in the next part, I'm going to tell you the games that I think you should play because the library is quite stacked. So in about 10 seconds, we're going to show you the first game, and I'll be right back. Nice 10-second break there, and we are back with Demon Front. And I will say this is one of my favorite games of all time on the PGM. And just so you're aware, I'm not going over the entire library, just the games I love to play, and I think you will too. And Demon Front here has an absolutely spectacular intro. Now this game always gets said that it's just a clone of Metal Slug. And that is 100% true. It is really just a Metal Slug clone, but it is a spectacular one, and it does have its own unique mechanics. And there's nothing wrong with cloning Metal Slug if you do as good of a job as the developers did on the Metal Slug franchise, or at least up to 3 in my opinion. Demon Front is just a legit 10 out of 10 Hall of Fame first ballot run and gun side-scrolling game, and I stand by it. But leave me a comment down below and tell me if you think this lives up to the height of Metal Slug. I just love this game. The graphics are absolutely spectacular. That fire effect in the background looks so realistic, and everything going on screen at once. There's barely any slowdown in Demon Front compared to something like Metal Slug 2 or X, so it does have some slowdown. Now that's just not down to the faster processor, because there was a math error in Metal Slug that caused it to run a little bit slower, but the faster clock CPU on the PGM does allow it to show more on screen at once without having that slowdown that is indicative to Neo Geo. And don't get me wrong, I love the Neo Geo, I've got a massive collection for it, but this hardware is better suited for some of the higher test 2D games that it is putting on it. But if you've never played Demon Front before, you 100% owe it to yourself to do so, because this is just a spectacular game, and compared to something like Metal Slug, it is definitely a deep cut, but there's so many different levels to explore, so many different enemy varieties, and I just absolutely love the artwork. This background here, this skullstone building with all of those teeth coming out, with these demons coming down with rockets that explode if they touch you strapped to their chest. The creativity in this game is an A+, and that's what I really love about it. It's not just mechanically sound, it's also incredibly charming. And the boss fights, just like Metal Slug, are huge, elaborate, and quite difficult, and that's what I really want out of a game like this. It's got so much challenge, so much charm, and so much creativity. All of those factors combined together to make this a 10 out of 10. It's an 11 out of 10 too if you got a friend to play with, because you will see that there's a press start icon on the screen, and you can totally do this one in 2 players. It is a great game for game night. And if you haven't noticed yet, there is an animal buddy following us around, and you can use that as both a shield as well as a special attack, so it does have additional mechanics compared to Metal Slug. And that's why, even though I do think it's a clone, I think it takes the Metal Slug formula and expands upon it, and I absolutely love that. Now, fair warning, if you do want to buy a cartridge for this, it is one of the PGM's more expensive games, but compared to the most expensive Neo Geo MVS games, this is still, in my opinion, a deal. If you know the person you're buying it from, you can get this for around $400, maybe even cheaper if the cartridge is a little bit worn down. But this is the first game I think you should play if you want to check out PGM, whether you want to buy a board or whether you want to just emulate it with Final Burn Neo. And trust me, emulation for PGM is spot on accurate, and I can't wait to see what gets done with the MiSTer FPGA boards, because I think it's going to probably be even better. But just look at that granny in the background shooting those guns off. It is just filled with charm and excitement. Every background is lush and detailed. The gameplay is so fast and responsive. I can't think of a single complaint about this game, and the soundtrack is straight fire, so go ahead and listen. Great soundtrack, maybe the bullet sound effects are a little bit loud though, but moving over to Cave, a lot of what the PGM is known for, we're going to start with Ketsui, the cartridge I showed you in the intro in this video. And if you are a fan of bullet hell shmups, then the PGM is going to be an awesome platform for you either to collect for or to check out via emulation. And I would say that Ketsui is my favorite game as far as the PGM Cave games are concerned. But that might be because I've also spent the most time with it. But if you've never played a bullet hell game before, don't think they're too difficult to start. I am in no way, shape, or form an expert at any of these, and I do not play them for the scoring mechanics. So if you want to leave a comment down below and tell me I'm not playing for the right score, I 100% understand that. It's just not how I enjoy it. I just like to see how far I can get in on a game with 1 credit, and I'm very close to 1cc in Ketsui, but I did have to take a couple month break, so probably now I'm further away than I would like. But these games are just incredible to me. The focus, the concentration required to navigate all these bullet patterns. I love learning games, I love getting better at them, and I love being able to practice. And that's the type of thing, if you do want to practice a game like this, you can use emulation, you can use save states and go back and forth in certain areas to learn the patterns better before you try a 1cc attempt either via emulation or original hardware. But Cave makes some of the best bullet hell shmups ever made, and I absolutely love their art style as well. Those guns coming out of that high-rise tower here, all of those tanks in the background. There is so much on screen at once, and it 100% all just works. Now, of course, there is going to be some slowdown, but that is usually coded into the game in harder areas. But let's see the first boss here. I love the bosses in this game. I love how they use those pre-rendered sprites. It just looks incredible, and I love the patterns in Ketsui as well. They're some of my favorite cave patterns of all time. and I just can't get enough of navigating around them. When you're playing a game like Ketsui correctly, when you're doing well at it, it is such a sense of accomplishment. You love your time with it, but it is a learning experience. But all I can tell you is stick with it. You will get better. I haven't played this game in probably like 3 or 4 months, but I was able to still get past the first boss without taking a single hit. So some of that muscle memory is there, and that's what this game is all about. Muscle memory and understanding what is coming and how to navigate it. And that is why I can't recommend games like this enough, even if you've never played a bullet hell shmup before. Trust me, they are fun. Do not look at the screen and think there's no way you could ever play this, because you can. I was in the same spot years ago thinking there's no way in hell I'd ever be good at a game like this. And outside of that death there, because I looked away at my phone, trust me, I didn't just die, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if you believe me. You can learn these games. And I love Cave as well because the soundtracks are always incredible. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll come back and talk more about PGM games. Awesome soundtrack, awesome gameplay, awesome artwork, and again, because these are converted onto other ROM cartridges, you can grab a Cave bullet hell shmup for like $300–400 all day long. I know it's not 100% original. That Ketsui cartridge didn't exist like that when it was first sold, but this is a really affordable and fun way to get into Cave shmups, because trust me, if you get into their PCBs, you better bring $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 all day long to buy one game. But play Ketsui, take my word for it, it is another 10 out of 10 Hall of Fame first ballot game. Now let's move on to another genre, because we're going to be mixing genres up. Trust me, there's going to be more shmups, but we're going to take a look at our first fighting game, and that is Martial Masters. In a lot of ways, this feels like IGS's version of something like Street Fighter Alpha 3 or Street Fighter 3, maybe a little combination of both. And this is deep cut territory. This is the definition of deep cut. Pop open the dictionary, look it up. You're going to see something like Martial Masters right next to it. But you get a really good roster, a lot of different character types, different play styles, your small, your medium, and your heavy characters. There's going to be a lot for everyone to love here. And if you are into fighting games, you're going to absolutely enjoy your time with this one. But right off the top, the animations are incredible. Drunk Master here, obviously a kung fu movie trope. He sways around and he pivots and attacks. There's so many frames of animation. Everything looks so fluid. And the background there with those two guys cheering while everyone else is playing Go and watching that, it is detailed and it is fun. But of course, what are graphics in a fighting game if the mechanics are not sound? And the system here is legit as well. I don't know that it's going to rise to the level of something like Street Fighter Alpha 3, but it gets like 95% of the way there, and playing a deep cut fighting game is always a fun time when you play too much Street Fighter, too much King of Fighters, something like that, and you want a fresh experience. Martial Masters is going to be here for you. I know a lot of people play these at fight nights. I've got some friends that tell me that they brought this and everyone has a really good time, and you're going to have a good time with it too, whether you play against the CPU, which can be a little bit dumb and prone to blocking too much, or if you play against friends, that's going to be the way to do it. But just look at this, that background, sure not the most animated thing in the world, but it looks spectacular. And a lot of that's down to the hardware of the PGM. Of course, the artists need to make the incredible art, but it does have more pixels both in the width and the horizontal aspects, so you're going to get a little bit more detail. And like I said, there's 100% a character you're going to enjoy playing as. Red Snake is usually my main here when I do get a chance to play this game, and there's great combos and everything feels fast and fluid as well and responsive. Now, if you can't tell already, this definitely feels partially inspired by some of these stages in Street Fighter, but if you are going to borrow for some inspiration for your fighting game, Street Fighter is definitely a franchise that you can borrow from, and people absolutely love you for it. And again, I never hear anyone talk about Martial Masters, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've ever heard of this game before, because I would be curious. This is one of those deep cuts as far as deep cuts are concerned. But again, Drunk Master versus Scorpion here. I just love all of the characters' personalities as well. Scorpion running around like an actual sort of bug, and Drunken Master swaying around because he is intoxicated. while you have this back alley Chinese scene here with everyone just going on about their day, this game has everything I need from a fighting game in 2D. The characters are unique, they're dynamic, and they've got a great moveset. All of the controls are fast and fluid, and the combos just make sense, and the artwork and backgrounds are spectacular as well. Some are a little bit more muted, like Drunken Master stage here, just being out in the woods. There's not a lot going on, but the colors still pop, and your characters against those background colors really do work for me. So that's the type of thing. This isn't going to be A+ tier background artwork. You're talking more like the A- to B+ category. But just like the first two games, I'm going to give you a taste of the soundtrack because I like it as well. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, and we'll come back and do another PGM game.
Round 2. Fight!
I just love the soundtrack for Monkey Boy stage, and I love all those little monkeys just running around the background. Every time I play this game, I am entertained and I am happy. Now, the other genre that is well represented on the PGM is going to be the beat 'em up genre. There are a ton of games to pick from, and a lot of those games have different ROM hacks, both official and unofficial, that you may enjoy more than the base game. But for me, I absolutely love the Gladiator, and this is the stock version. I don't believe that there's any ROM hacks of this particular one. But right off the intro here, with that cape blowing in that fiery breeze, the colors, the animation, the gameplay are again spot on. And IGS was not a huge company compared to somebody like SNK. They were definitely not as big, but they did so much with this hardware and had so many different genres on here that are arcade staples. There is a huge library of good stuff, even though the library for the entire PGM isn't anywhere near as big as something like the Neo Geo or the Capcom CPS or CPS2. There is a lot of gold on this board. Now, there's also a lot of mahjong and puzzle games that you can 100% just ignore completely. I'm not going to be talking about any of those in this video. But the Gladiator, amazing game. Awesome combo system for beat 'em ups, some really hard bosses, and again some incredible artwork. And that's what I always come back to when I think about the PGM. It has the three things I need out of a game. Awesome gameplay mechanics, awesome graphics, and awesome sound. And just like every other game I've shown you on this list so far, it just becomes that much better when you have another person you can play with. This is a two-player game, and you're 100% going to have an absolute blast. And there are so many enemies on screen at once. Having a second player is definitely going to be to your benefit. But of course, as I've said in many videos before, whether you know it or not, it is not a beat 'em up game if there is not an elevator involved, and the Gladiator has the elevator for you. And this is just another game. I feel like most people haven't heard of it, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what games you've heard of so far and what games are new to you, because I really do feel like a lot of people haven't played much on the PGM, and I feel like that's why a lot of people are excited for it on MiSTer FPGA, because it is a piece of hardware that not many people are familiar with. But again, if you do want to get into collecting it, you can get a PGM motherboard for like 80 bucks, maybe 100 if it's a bad day. And honestly, some new modern games cost 70, so for an extra $10, you can have a PGM motherboard. But as we move on further into the Gladiator, I love all the colors and different themes this game uses. A lot of the PGM stuff has some Chinese themes in it, whether it's mythology or other legends of Chinese history. And the Gladiator is going to be no different, but this emerald jade green in the background here, while all these enemies come out and attack you, just 100% works. And I love the amount of enemies that are on screen at once. Generally, they're all going to be of like 1 or 2 varieties, because the screen probably can't fill itself up with 7 or 8 different unique enemy types, but each level has new enemy variants, and you're 100% going to be there for it. And there are a decent amount of characters as well, and you are going to find that in some instances, the character you have is not the best for the job. These flying archers here, near impossible to hit with this first character, but as I move on, so much easier. And again, awesome soundtrack, 30 seconds, be right back, more games. Awesome soundtrack, awesome gameplay. If you like beat 'em ups whatsoever, you've never played the Gladiator before, definitely give it a shot. If you have a game night with friends over, have them play it as well. Just be aware that most of the beat 'em ups on the PGM are longer experiences. These are not going to be games that you beat in 22 minutes. So give it like 40-50 minutes depending on how good you are at them. It's definitely a longer game, and I kind of enjoy that. But moving over to this shmup category again, and remember my pronunciations are the best I can do, Escalуда here is just another spectacular shmup. And this is where doing these Bible videos gets really hard because I have to talk about a similar genre from a similar company and I need to make it fresh. But Cave did a great job of that for me because we have a completely different theming here. If the first game we showed you was more of a modernistic military shmup, this has that retro vibe going on here. It's almost like a steampunk version of Edwardian England, going through castles and shooting all of these flying ships. So from a graphical standpoint alone, you already get a completely different vibe. We have knights with lances flying in the air. But every Cave shmup has a different mechanic as well, whether that's scoring or how you attack. And that's the great thing. If you're not vibing with one Cave shmup, just play a different one and you will probably find something else you love there. And again, Cave is just the king of these bullet patterns. Navigating through this mid-boss here, flying around all of the projectiles, it just 100% feels so incredible. And that's what I love about this genre on face value. When you're playing well, you feel like you were untouchable, and when you start dying, you realize you need to start practicing and getting better at that area. And that is why these are the type of games that just become so much fun to play and learn. And I know you can play these as two-player games. I have never once played a bullet hell shmup with another person. It's something that I like to focus on singularly. At the first stage boss here, again, I just love how the patterns have both that geometric feel to them as well as more organic, just kind of randomness. It makes you realize where your openings are, and navigating through this here, when you succeed at it, there's no better feeling in arcade gaming in my opinion. It is just that good. And again, it's another cartridge that you can get for like the $300 to $400 mark, and if you know Cave prices, you're knowing that that is an absolute steal of a deal. And we get this first boss here, just like the first boss in Katsui. I have not taken a death through the first stage because I have played this one relatively recently-ish enough where I do remember it. But as we move on to the second stage here, some of those tanks do come in, has some Katsui vibes, but it still holds that kind of medieval steampunk aesthetic, and I think that really works well for a Cave game. And Cave is always playing around with different genres. Something like Death Smiles, completely different than Katsui. Something like Katsui, completely different than this game here. There is a Cave game for everybody, whether you want to talk difficulty or just theming. But again, it is Cave, so it also has an incredible soundtrack. 30 seconds this time. We got a lot more games to talk about. Be right back. And before anybody comments, yes, I know you can absorb the purple projectiles, but it does make a little bit of a sound effect noise, and I was trying to get you the cleanest sample of the soundtrack I could get, because a lot of these games, it's really hard to show you the soundtrack because there is that sound above it as you are shooting your own projectiles. But again, just a 10 out of 10 spectacular game, and hopefully I made this seem fresh compared to Katsui, because I've got to do this one more time with a Cave shmup. But you will see as I get to the second stage boss, this is when I start taking my deaths, and that's because I haven't played this game in probably a year or so, and for some reason I only remember like the first level of every bullet hell shmup I've practiced, and then from there my memory goes completely blank. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what is your favorite Cave shmup, because I would be curious. Now, as we jump around into different genres to keep this flowing and keep it fresh, we're doing Spectral vs. Generation, which is another awesome fighting game on the system that hews way more towards like a Guilty Gear aesthetic. If Martial Masters was kind of emulating something like Street Fighter Alpha 3 or Street Fighter 3 proper, then Spectral vs. Generation is definitely taking that Guilty Gear aesthetic and running with it. But again, if you're going to borrow an aesthetic and a concept from a franchise, Then Guilty Gear is another one to pull inspiration from, and I love the introductory sequence, it is so good. Now be aware, this is made by Idea Factory, and there is a PlayStation 2 version of this game, which is excellent as well. You do not need to have this on the PGM to have fun, but it's where it came from, and I really do like this version. And it's just completely different than Martial Masters. Now there are other fighting games on the PGM, but I don't like them near enough to actually talk about them, so you're just getting Martial Matters and Spectral Versus Generation from me. But you will see here with these aerial combos, such a Guilty Gear vibe. This game is fast, it's fluid, it's well animated, and it's got a great aesthetic and vibe going for it. If you're into fighting games, and if you're not into Street Fighter, not your sort of franchise, then this is what you want to be playing. And again, Fight Nights with friends, another spectacular game. It's got the burst mechanic, it's got great combos, it's got a lot of different things you can learn, and a great character roster as well, giving you some versatility as to who you want to play as and how you want to use that character to your advantage. Now, playing against the AI, even at normal difficulty, they can be quite cheap and annoying, but that's how I capture these videos. Like every fighting game ever made, it is so much better with friends, but the AI gives you enough. Experience the game, check it out, see if you want to buy a cartridge, or see if you want to just use Final Burn Neo to play it. But whatever option you do choose, definitely don't take the option of not trying Spectral Versus Generation out, because it is a banger. And I love all the backgrounds, those birds flying through the mist there. This is a very pretty game to look at as well. And as far as graphics are concerned, good graphics will not make a bad game good, but good graphics will make a good game great. And that's what we're dealing with Spectral Versus Generation here. It just has such a vibe. It's basically Guilty Gear mixed with something like Darkstalkers and a light horror theming fantasy as well. But trust me, if you like fighting games and you've never played this before, check it out. It might be your new deep cut favorite, or maybe you'll just think, yeah, it's decent, I've checked it out and I don't need to play it again. But again, leave me a comment down below, tell me if you played this game, what you think about it, or if you're planning on playing it after this video, because so much of what I do here as far as these long form videos are concerned is to try to introduce and convince you guys to play new and different games that maybe you've never checked out, like this next pick right here. Now note, there are a lot of different versions of Knights of Valor on the PGM. There are a lot of upgraded versions, there's a lot of ROM hacks, and it is really difficult to say where the official IGS releases stop and where fan hacks start. But whatever version you pick, it's going to be a good time. But I wanted to keep this video with just one Knights of Valor entry in the entire franchise, and I have gone with Knights of Valor 2, and I have gone with the upgraded plus variant of that. More characters, different things, just a lot more to look at. But Knights of Valor Superheroes, also incredible beat 'em ups. Play all of them. Definitely not back to back because they don't change enough to feel that dynamic, but they are a blast. And again, if you like beat 'em ups, you've never played this game before, you should 100% check it out. It does have similar vibes to the Gladiator, and you might even see some enemies that have been reskinned, but this has different mechanics. You're going to see that we have these throwable items that we can collect, and the roster of playable characters in the upgraded versions is huge. These games have more characters you can select from than pretty much every other beat 'em up I have ever played of this era, and that is always a great thing because choice is always a good thing. And you can see here as we move to a new character, his range is massive compared to the first character we used, and that is going to be a big advantage in some levels. And I love the Knights of Valor soundtrack as well. 35 seconds, be right back, more games, more fun. Just love the soundtrack in the game, those Chinese music vibes going on, and that's the great thing about the PGM. If you are a beat 'em up fan, if you are a fighting game fan, or if you are a shmup fan, this board is going to have so much for you to play. But if you want something more like a sports game, don't even bother, because I don't even think there is one. And that's the thing, there are a ton of games for the PGM that you're going to have absolutely no interest in, or probably not like me, things like Mahjong, you're just not going to be that into them. But a great beat 'em up like this with friends is a great experience. And I do love Knights of Valor because it has some hidden things going on in it as well. As we're fighting this boss here, you're going to see that there is this dam in the background. If you hit it a few times, it starts leaking water and it gives you a visual indication that something can happen. And if you attack it enough, you can actually do this. Burst the dam and then watch that boss's health bar go down to almost completely dead. Always be on the lookout in a game like this from PGM because there's a lot of different details and things that can affect the gameplay. But as far as the artwork, I like this one ever so slightly more than the Gladiator, even if I like the gameplay ever so slightly more of the Gladiator. This kind of wooded scene, all the trees dying because it's winter, the dead soldiers with arrows in their backs in the background. There is so much visual storytelling going on in Knights of Valor 2. It is just that good of a game. But honestly, there's 3 different versions of this, 3 different games in the franchise, all on PGM, so you pick your favorite. Now, speaking of picking favorites, I can tell you that this game is actually not my favorite in any way, shape, or form. It is a great bullet hell shmup. It is just too hard for me, but that's the entire point of its release. And this game is Dodonpachi Daioju Black Label. Now, I'm actually playing a recently-ish discovered export version of this ROM, and that is just because I get to talk about it on the channel because it's the most esoteric of them all. And if you're not aware of Cave Games, there is White Label, which is the original release, and trust me, they are not easy, but they are easier than the Black Label games. Do not start with this game if you are not familiar with bullet hell shmups. This is going to be the hardest thing you're going to encounter on the IGS PGM, and I do love that difficulty, but I haven't played it in over a year, and I am just absolutely getting my ass handed to me every single minute of this game. But if you love shmups and you want to get into bullet hell shmups and you want to go for the gold ring of difficulty, then Dodonpachi Daioju Black Label is going to be there for you. And this is still the type of thing that you're going to be able to get on a conversion cart totally easy. Just be aware that there's different versions of this game, and this one's technically Dodonpachi 3, or that's what it was going to be called as its export version. It can get a little confusing trying to figure out exactly what you're looking at because the title card for this game does not resemble either Dodonpachi White Label or the Black Label variant, but it is the Black Label export version. It even gets me confused. But as we get to the first boss here, the bullet patterns in this game are hyper-organic as well as geometric. You have to deal with both, and I'm able to navigate some of them just by sight reading, but this is the type of game that you're 100% going to have to spend a lot of hours practicing with to get anywhere near being good at it. You either love that or you hate it. Leave me a comment down below and tell me, is that learning process something you're really into, or is it something you don't gravitate towards? Because if it's not something you're into, don't bother, just watch a playthrough of an expert player and be amazed. But if you do like learning, this is the game for you. And just like the last 2 Cave games, absolutely amazing soundtrack. Listen, and I'll come back with more games. Cave could just make an awesome soundtrack. Now be aware on this video, I have not done Dodonpachi 2 B-Storm, and that is because it wasn't actually made by Cave, but it was licensed by IGS and they made their own version in the franchise. And while there is nothing wrong with the game, it is not a bullet hell game because it starts off way too easy. And if you want to get into the bullet hell genre, if you want to get into bullet hell games on the PGM, I would just basically skip B-Storm. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. You definitely check it out if you want to. I just didn't really feel like including it on this video, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if that was a mistake or if that makes sense to you. But if you want the maximum challenge, if you want to be frustrated in a good way, if you want to spend months learning one single video game to try to get better at it, then Dodonpachi Daioju Black Label is 100% going to be for you. Now we got one last beat 'em up, and that is Oriental Legend. Definitely not one of the best looking games on the PGM, but it's got a ton of charm and character, and that pig with the pitchfork right there, just absolutely my jam. This feels like the early days of Neo Geo, where you had something like Art of Fighting or Fatal Fury that didn't look like the later games on the hardware. This game has that exact same vibe, but the beat 'em up mechanics are sound, and it doesn't play much like Knights of Valor or the Gladiator, so it does have some diversity there. And I just love all the specials, all the artwork, and all of the strange things that are going on. You go into this cave and there's a giant heart that you can attack while you're hitting these demons. But just like every other game on this list, it also has a great soundtrack. 30 seconds, and I'll close out the video because we've talked about everything I want to talk about. Awesome soundtrack, and Oriental Legend is a great game, and I'm playing the super version of this because, like I said, there's a lot of different ROM hacks on the PGM, both official and not. But these are the games I recommend you check out to start with the PGM hardware. This has been one of my longest overview videos so far, and I'm going to go rest my voice because 30 minutes of straight commentary, not the easiest thing in the world to do. But trust me, if you've never played the PGM, buy it, emulate it, check it out somehow because the games are amazing. Bye-bye.